2 years ago, I became a game developer. So I did what any game developer would do when it's time to take stock. I built myself a character screen. Stick around, we're going to go through all of it. In March of 2024, I called myself a game developer for the first time. I had a very specific plan. The plan was to make games, build a YouTube audience, and educate simultaneously. I could leverage the fact that I was already an experienced teacher, and I could use all three of those things to eventually build a stable income doing something I actually wanted to do. It was a good plan. In hindsight, it was confident, unpolished, and missing features. Here's where it started. I made several JavaScript games like Frogger, Chess, and I posted them on my website for people to play. I had put stuff out there, but I didn't feel like a game dev. The moment I actually felt like a game dev happened when the Twitch streamer played my first Game Jam game. I watched the whole thing live. The bugs, the confusion, the moments where something finally clicked for them. It was genuinely thrilling. Not because the game was good, and trust me when I say I don't believe it was, but because a stranger was playing something I had built, navigating a world and reacting to the challenges I had made. It existed in a way that it hadn't before he had pressed play. That was the moment. Not when I wrote the first line of code, but when someone else was playing it. So, 2 years later, how'd the plan hold up to being stress tested by reality? Well, we've got 6 stats to get through to answer that. Some of them are going to surprise you, one of them's not going to move at all, but first, we got a graveyard to walk through. Every game developer has a graveyard. It's usually a folder or several folders full of things that started with a lot of energy and ended with a file name like Final V3 Actually Final for Real. Mine is filled with Game Jam entries I abandoned before submitting. I also have classic remakes that taught me a lot, but I shipped nothing with them. A YouTube series that made it 2 full episodes with a very ambitious outline for episode 3. I still have the script for it somewhere. And the one that lives in my head rent-free, an homage to cannon fodder. Instead of soldiers in the jungle, it's set in a fantasy dungeon, with some town building and some humor baked in. I cut and pasted the code from every tutorial I could find to make the first version. It had promise. The plan was to rebuild Dungeon Fodder properly after the prototype, with clean, purposeful code instead of whatever I had done the first time. But rewriting it was boring, so I stopped. That's the whole story. The game progress stopped because rewriting an already built thing from scratch, as it turns out, far less interesting than building something new. Which is a lesson I could have learned faster, but c'est la vie. Here's the thing though, looking back at all those abandoned projects, one pattern stood out more than any of the individual failures. The game jams were the only thing I was actually finishing. I was prototyping, I was starting new games, I was planning, but I wasn't finishing. I wasn't putting something in front of people and having it exist in the world as a complete playable thing. Everything else had a soft deadline or no deadline, which when you're also working a full-time job and trying to build something on the side, means the deadline quietly becomes next month, and then the month after that, until eventually you have a very well thought out project that has never come close to shipping. The jams had a submission deadline. You either hit it or you didn't. And that constraint turned out to be the most valuable thing I could have been doing. The shift happened when I stopped thinking of game jams as competitions and started thinking of them as short productions. Having a hard deadline with a forced scope, you figure out fast what the game actually needs, what the core loop requires, and you cut everything else. And you do that over and over again until you stop having to think about it consciously, until scoping is something you do automatically rather than something you must force yourself into. That's what the jam grind gave me. Not just a portfolio, not a fan base, the instinct to finish. And then came the week where all that practice decided to show up at once. I won a game jam, and that same week, my first YouTube video blew up, and people were playing my Zelda remake and enjoying it. 3 things in 1 week, after a long stretch of things not landing the way I had hoped. That week didn't make me a game developer, but it made me realize I'd been becoming one for longer than I thought. All those jams, all that finishing, all those loops I had built and submitted and moved on from, that was the XP bar filling up. It just didn't have a visible counter. The Dungeon Fodder product I had abandoned, its DNA carried over to my new project even if the code didn't. It wasn't a failure, it was research that I didn't know I was doing yet. The graveyard taught me how to finish. The next question was, who was I finishing for? I want to talk about community, and I'm going to be straightforward about where I actually am with that. I have around 1,400 subscribers on YouTube. That's not nothing, but it's also not yet a community in the way that some creators describe it. You know, the ones where the audience shapes the work and where the feedback loop is constant and visible and, two-directional. My channel is still early. The numbers don't feel real in any visceral way yet, and I'd rather say that plainly than pretend I've built something I haven't. What did shape me and give me a sense of belonging in this space was the time I've spent in other people's communities. Gamedev Discord servers, forums, online spaces where developers at every level are actually working through problems, sharing progress, and asking questions. I spent a lot of time in those spaces, and what I found is that being in those rooms consistently, over time, does something that nothing else quite replicates. It calibrates you. When you're only seeing your own work, it's very difficult to know where you sit. You can't tell if the thing you're stuck on is a you problem or an everyone problem. You can't tell if your instincts are good or if you've just stopped questioning them. You don't have enough reference points. Participating in communities full of other developers by answering questions and helping them to debug problems you've never personally encountered, watching how people at different stages approach the same challenge, all of that stuff gave me a real sense of where I actually am. It shows me what I know well and what I'm still learning. And most of all, what I thought was hard has turned out to be quite normal. And that, more than any subscriber count, is what brought my imposter syndrome down. Not feeling more successful, just having more data points. But being in those communities gave me something else I didn't expect. Helping someone debug an unfamiliar problem in a Discord server is the same skill as teaching. Every weird edge case someone brought into the community was practice. Every explanation I had to write out carefully because the person asking didn't have the same context I had. That was the same muscle I use when I'm writing course material or scripting a video. I was already a teacher before I was a game developer. I just didn't realize for a while that teaching was helping in multiple places simultaneously, and all of that was increasing my stats. Alright, we've been building up to this long enough. Before we get to the numbers though, I need to tell you about the decision that changed them. There's a concept in game design lovingly referred to as killing your darlings. It's the point in development where you look at everything in the project and make the hard decision to remove something you've been treating as essential. Not because it's bad, sometimes it's one of the best ideas in your GDD, but because the game without it is actually cleaner, it's more focused and more actually, itself than the game was with it. The best cuts are the ones that in hindsight seem obvious. For most of the first 2 years, I was operating on the assumption that game dev success and YouTube success had to arrive together, or not at all. The feature that was breaking the core loop wasn't a game mechanic, it was the false belief in the shared trajectory. I didn't cut it voluntarily. The new teaching semester made the cut for me. Teaching is a full-time commitment on top of a full-time job. When time becomes genuinely scarce, not just busy, but actually scarce, you find out very fast what you need to actually prioritize, because you can't prioritize everything. I stopped chasing the next video, and I started writing down new ideas instead of starting them, and I committed to one project at a time, through to a real milestone before touching anything else. When the noise cleared, I knew what I was making. I knew what my YouTube channel was for. I knew what teaching provided me, and I knew where I was going with my games. They stopped competing. They became different rooms in the same building. I know what I'm making. That sounds simple, but it took me 2 years to get here. And it updated my stats. Let's look at them. So I built a stats screen. Look, if I'm going to spend 2 years making games and then do a retrospective video about it, I'm going to do the retrospective in the most game dev way I possibly can. So here it is. Every stat. Let's go through them. Shipping. Year 0, 1. Now, 6. This one actually moved, which I want to take a moment to appreciate, because as you're about to see, not all of them do. Games are getting finished, submitted, and put in front of people. The jam grind built this stat quietly in the background, whether I was paying attention or not. I'll take it. Tutorial consumption. Year 0, 10. Now, 2. This is the one I'm most proud of, and I know it doesn't look like the flashiest number on the screen, but there's a point, and it's different for every developer, where watching other people build things stops being research and starts being a very comfortable way of not building things yourself. The stat's at a 2 now, and I'm fine with that. Maybe it's a 3. Yeah, we'll go with 3. Core loop clarity. Year 0, 1. Now, 8. You saw this one coming. It was at a 4 before I made the decision we just talked about. Knowing what I'm actually making and not trying to make 3 things simultaneously, that's what pushed the stat from mid-journey to where it needed to be. Explaining things. Year 0, 6. Now 7. This one started high because I was already a teacher before I was a game developer. What changed in 2 years isn't the skill, it's that I stopped treating it like a footnote to the developer identity I was trying to build and started accepting that it was the main thing. It counts, and it's always counted. Imposter syndrome. Year 0, 10. Now 7. This is the one I was tempted to lie about. I genuinely considered putting it at a 5. 5 feels like I've made meaningful progress. 7 feels like I still have a problem and I'm just reporting it publicly for some reason. But it's 7, and the honest answer for why it came down isn't that I got more successful, it's that I spent enough time around other developers to get calibrated. I know where I sit now. That's different from knowing you're good. It's knowing where your skills are and that you exist in the game dev space. Imposter you has less room to operate when you have actual reference points to rein them in. Scope estimation. Year 0, 3. Now 4. Moving on. Those are the 6 I planned to show you. There's a 7th one though, and I added it after I sat down, took a breath, and actually ran the numbers for the first time. Naive optimism. Year 0, 10. Now 4. The particular flavor of excitement you have at the start, where everything feels possible and the timeline is always optimistic, and surely it'll all come together somehow. That one took a hit when I did the math on what building a game, a channel, and a course simultaneously actually cost. Cost in time, energy, and money. The difference between game dev as a hobby and game dev as something you're trying to make a living from is significant. I understood that mentality before, but I understand it in my bones after running the numbers. The drive is still there, stronger than it's ever been if I'm being honest, but it's a different kind of drive. It's not excited anymore, it's committed, and those are not the same thing. I'd take some of that naive optimism back if I could, but I wouldn't trade the clarity it left behind. So that's where things stand. 2 years in, most of the stats moved, one of them didn't, and the clarity that came from all of it is exactly what's going into what comes next. And if you're watching this at the start of your own journey, this last bit's for you. If you're in year 1 of something, game dev, YouTube, whatever the thing is, the stat screen looks bad at the start. That's not a problem. That's what year 1 looks like. The naive optimism is load bearing at that stage. You need it to get started, and you'll lose some of it as you go, and that's okay. That's not failure, that's the prototype doing its job. Ship the prototype. You need the data to refine the project. And to whoever I am in March of 2028, watching this back and getting ready to make a 2-year update to a 2-year update, I really hope scope estimation has made it to a 5.